So here's what, we're supposed, by the time we return to the big group, have proposed a couple of concrete ideas that might actually be adopted as part of Let's Move's, Missoula's campaign, if you will. And obviously this group was intended to think specifically about physical activity and perhaps the built environment, but certainly physical activity in the context of the stickiness term that I used, right? So not let's launch a nice 15-week pedometer program, but what are we going to do that would really enhance physical activity in a systematic way in the region? One way to get at that, we got a big group, and we could just sort of raise hands and start throwing ideas out. I was going to propose to churn our brains a little, and because we've been just sitting in one place, that we break maybe into 2 or 3 groups, that, you know, or even 4, but small discussion groups, like Greg, maybe, Greg, say hi, you didn't introduce yourself before.
Greg Owen.
And Greg, formerly with the health department, right, Cavnar, and now just health advocate extraordinaire. That means he's quote-unquote retired, so we take advantage of him in every way that we can and don't have to pay him anymore. How cool is that? So maybe the 4 of us would break small groups, literally as few as 5 or 6 of us, because we're not that big a group, into small discussion groups. And have a few minutes of, and I hate to use the word, but brainstorming, but really think about sort of where you think there might be some areas of intervention. And each of those groups might come up with 1 or 2 that we could then share to the larger group. And then see, first of all, if we get some points of confluence. What we often find is when we break people off and have them in discussion and they come back together, if 2 or 3 things pop up consistently from independently operating discussion groups, then there might be some consensus around it. Can you see the logic of that? By the same token, we may find ourselves all over the place. Then let's have a larger group discussion and pick some winners, because in the end, we're still supposed to only recommend 2. Now, the good news is this. We can take notes as we're doing our work. We have some brilliant ideas that are more than 2. We can certainly record them and bring them back to Mary and the Let's Move campaign. Does everybody understand that? So none of this churning and discussion will go for naught. None of it will go to waste. But our goal is to sort of try to skim the cream off the top. That'll be the 2 that we'll present to the larger group. How do you guys like this approach? So let me say the steps again. Break it into really small groups. I'll just do a little count off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You won't get to sit with the people you came with. That's sort of intentional. I want you to mix yourselves up for these small discussions. They know, oh no, but I'm with my buds. Listen, trust me, when I did community workshops and I got a room full of like traffic engineers and planners and public health advocates and the school people, the last thing I do is let the engineers all sit together. Because you can imagine, oh, we should change the standards for paving thickness so that it doesn't... You're talking about the nerdy stuff. But if I make them sit with normal people, we actually get good stuff out of them. I'm serious. It's really... Same happens, by the way, you put a bunch of nutritionists together. You know what they're talking about. Omega-3s, omega-6s, what's the ratio? How do I mean, you know, and that's the same thing. We all gravitate back to our thing. Which is cool, by the way. I get it all. But so, you with me on this?
Along those lines, is it Missoula County or Missoula City?
I think it's county should really be the landscape. I would urge you, and I understand the campaign is officially a countywide campaign. Confirming that, right? Yeah, so... Yeah, good. Thank you for being here, and make sure we have an idea that... So, if everything feels like urban Missoula, I think that's problematic. It would be great if maybe of our 2 ideas, at least one of them, make sure that it feels like it has some more... Let's actually, do you guys all agree that maybe we want to make that one of our goals? That as we go even to our small working groups, bring back ideas that reflect county level. Sound good? Okay, so far so good? I'm going to do a quick count off. 4. We will then take 4 groups, just at 4 corners of the room. I'm only going to suggest we do that for about 10 or 15 minutes, churn some ideas to pitch back to the big group as sort of strategic. And I'm going to make one more goal. I'm going to suggest you get beefy. That is totally fine. Don't feel like you have to leave. I love that sound. Okay, if you get, but don't do it on our account. Not because she's just not that loud, so don't do it on our account. I want you to come back with more concrete rather than less. Not, we need more sidewalks in Missoula. Or out in the county, we got a lot of county roads that they should be safer for bicycling. Get more concrete. Say, we're going to have to come up with a way to fund the building of shoulders on our county roads if we're really serious about people being able to ride bikes out there. And here's an idea that we think might help fund that. You guys understand what I just said? The distinction between saying we got to make roads safer for bicyclists and here's an idea about how to make roads safer for bicyclists. You okay with that? The second thing is harder to do, but it's also much more productive. Okay, I'm going to count by 4s right now. First of all, 1, 2, 3, 4. Got it? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, you're remembering your numbers. Everybody get what's happening now? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Are you with us? 2. No, you're taping. So that's it. 2. Got those numbers? 15 minutes. Intensive thinking. Try to come up with a couple, and here's what's going to happen, so you're forewarned. When we come back, your group's got to pitch to the remainder of the group to pick winners. 3s, so you want to be able to pitch. 4s right down here in this corner. 4s right here. 2 more.
Let's go right here.
You know what? They should not put type A competitive people in these roles. Get in here. Let's go. Okay, that's refining. Greg, you want to tell us what you guys had? Are you the speaker from your group?
Yeah, I'll do that. And we had a little trouble with your task, and
Okay, that's fine.
because you said it was important doesn't mean that we do that.
Yeah, I
the school,
understand.
or we don't
I
do
understand.
it. And I'm going to
all the notes.
Yeah.
I'll capture everything. Good. So we didn't really differentiate. I'm going to just throw out some of the ideas that came up. There was an interest in the focus on middle school age girls and education or supportive activities so that they'll be more active, and they felt like that was an area that was missing. There's a discussion about commuting to school for kids of different ages, more beyond the safe routes to school and more like whether you commute to other places as well, and the difficulty with winter and the drop-off of people feeling safe and comfortable doing that. And also that safe routes to school has been sort of limited, and it's mostly focused on elementary age. And there was interest in how do we ramp that up, and there was also talk about even to the point of before people get driver's licenses and they're in high school as an opportunity area to talk about biking and those sorts of things. There was interest in having more people come out and speak on when there's, along the lines of what Mark was proposing as citizens on key topics and how to make that happen. And there's a lot of discussion about educating cyclists and drivers. And a lot of the kinds of problems that exist out there relate to them not knowing enough about things, even to the point of seeing a young mom with an infant on a backpack on a bike with no helmet and not knowing that that's not a good idea.
It's America,
Right. So anyway, there was some discussion about that we need to do that, and we need to think about it all the way through and have it be a sort of successive, comprehensive thing, and not just try it in small bits. So those are some of the ideas. Oh, and then there were some, I'm going to put this out there anyway, because I think it's interesting that we tried some innovative things downtown. There were some people talking about, maybe they're not so good. And they need to be reconsidered in terms of the bike trails or whether people actually feel safe down there, and that it might be useful to reconsider.
Good.
Okay, so number 2. So we started out with one person's observation that we got an incredible bike path that now runs from Hamilton to Lolo, and it doesn't run from Lolo to Missoula. And while there's some discussion about that, it's an undone thing. So that then moved us, Mark, into your discussion about not just thinking in terms of citywide things, but thinking about the county. And our group observed that the city has been pretty active in thinking about bike trails and thinking about different ways for people to get across barriers like railroad tracks, in terms of thinking about lighting along trails, and yet the county doesn't really have anything. They have a road department, and they don't have much in the way of bike ped coordination whatsoever. And it is true that the county governs some ungovernable townships that sometimes view Missoula as telling them what do, and sometimes ask to be annexed to say Lake County or some other county where they have a more posse comitatus kind of government. But so our group talked about trying to sort of better coordinate discussions about sort of city-approved solutions to problems and try to find a way to affect some of those in the county at large, but also to start using stories that, like almost all small towns in Missoula County have a terrible fatality story that involved a bicycle in a car. Frenchtown used that story to create a bike system along the frontage road out there. We had a tragic accident here 4 or 5 years ago that involved a handful of girls from high school walking along Highway 10 out between East Missoula. That got a little bit of solution, but didn't get the ultimate solution out there in terms of the interstate. So we talked about using storytelling, strong stories, to highlight these issues, to push toward broader solutions in the county. And we also talked about the need, now that childhood obesity is a thing that that we're talking about as a thing. It's time to start thinking about it in a more integrated fashion in the county, and start thinking about how do health departments and road departments and libraries and all these different groups that provide sort of disparate services, how can we start looping them together so that we start thinking about solutions that are more holistic in terms of, okay, it's easy to get a group of engineers together and decide how thick to make the pavement, but it's not necessarily as easy to think about, well, how do we get the right thickness of pavement that's going to get them to a grocery store in an easy fashion where they don't get run over by a car. So that was we kind of honed in on a large area with a smaller city.
Good.
So our group came up with a number of things, and I'll just organize. One of the things that I think we locked in on is we really thought that the countywide schools should do a how I got to school survey. I mean, that if we could get all of our county schools to understand how their kids get to school, those different modalities, that would be a great first step. A number of other steps we identified off of that was strong advocating the use of our trails and pathways to get to school. The PTA walking bus sort of thing, so where you're walking in the neighborhood to school. And then beyond that, kind of backside employer help. So employers becoming aware that it's my week to get the kids on the walking bus and we're going to walk to school, so I'm going to be a half an hour late, and having employers support that. Working with districts around putting those bus drop-offs further away so the kids actually get a walk into the school area. And then a fourth item was really looking at school sites and biking barriers. What are the different things that need to be addressed? What are policies that need to be changed? So those all spun off of the very first thing, which was making sure we do that survey. Another thing was maybe working with the Boy Scouts to do solar lighting at intersections of trails and streets where we don't have intersections, so lighting all across trails. Extending to the countywide trail system, same thing. So Lolo, Bonner, up to the airport. How do we make sure that it's contiguous, or at least move forward in that regard? Fix the places where the bike trails or lanes kind of break down into nothing. There are different places in the city where you've got a bike trail and then all of a sudden you don't, and they're normally really very difficult places. Identify what those are and then prioritize them. And my guess is Donna knows that stuff, but how can we as community citizens help when we get to budget planning? How do we show up and get some of these things on the agenda instead of quietly having them X'd off the agenda because of a budget hearing? Bike map distribution centers, all the places where you might think people would pick them up. You can get them at that Current, you can get them at places. Where else can we get those bike maps?
Let me give you an example. I'm a visitor. I'm at one of the hotels. I should not walk into a hotel in this town and not be given one and told where I can get a bike. Did you know that the park system, I can get a loop, you can go down to the parks and get a free bike, and if you want to rent a bike, there are 3 bike shops. I'm staying at the DoubleTree. Around the corner is some bike shop, the Bike Rack or whatever it's called, which I only discovered walking on the very cool pedestrian bridge that you have over the river. But as I walked by, I'm thinking, when I walked into that hotel, they should have said, are you parking a car with us? No, I'm not. They said, delightful. Would you like a bike map? Because you're not parking a car here, we're going to give you this map for free as a reward for not using up parking space, and you can rent a bike, and here's a coupon for a reduced bike rental at the place right next door.
What's the name of that address?
Well, the Holiday Inn does have bikes available.
Say it again?
The Holiday Inn Parkside does have bikes available, but they had no maps, so. they're on the-
Great, okay, good.
But
good.
still, I mean, they're
But
there.
what about, sort of the standard thing? I mean, when we were working in Hawaii, so the hospitality industry, sort of, you call on the phone to make a hotel reservation, they say, will you be renting a car, blah, blah. They should be saying, would you like a bike waiting here for you? We've got a rental service and it can be sitting here. Which, by the way, do, if you go to Hilton Head, South Carolina, they'll drop it at your room and they'll pick it up afterwards, so. There's
So
geek
the chamber
shit.
does.
I checked in and they didn't tell me about that.
Yeah, no, they should be pitching it.
You know, that'd be part of
Okay,
it.
I didn't mean to interrupt, I just wanted to sort of build.
Sounds like a great idea, one with a lot of energy. huh?
Good.
I gotta say,
Ed,
Route 3
Ed.
is so concrete and so tangible. Look at what you're saying.
Well, we
You
got
gotta wait
more.
back here.
We're not done yet.
Wait, wait.
Look, I'm not going to stifle discussion.
Let's go.
Yeah, along that line, my family, we went to on family vacation, and this hotel, turns out they supposedly rented the bikes, and they just said, just take them. My family said that was the best part of the whole trip, was to be able to just get on the bike and just go. So maybe encouraging hotels just to have those bikes and have maps, especially in a town like Missoula, where you've got just amazing bike trails.
Keep going, John.
All right,
Excellent.
so we're going to get a little more ethereal here, though.
Oh, boy.
Out in Bonner and Tura, the place where we go to buy our groceries is the Bonner truck stop. There's a okay, not really, but sometimes, yes, there's food deserts in the kind of in those 3 places, and I think that that's something that we should, as we're looking to develop the mill site, how do we make sure that there is a local grocer that can be a part of that development while we got that canvas, that's a blank slate. Advocate for trail plowing in city and county budgets, so trail plowing, and then how might we use private volunteers with 4-wheelers and plows to actually get it done if we can't get it done another way. And then the last thing was investigate that truck project. Just to investigate what that means to be the one world, 2 wheels project and how we might be a part of that. Maybe they're looking for a test city. That's our list.
Cool. So I'll do just 2 quickies out of our group because I actually followed the instructions. So, no, I'm kidding. One of the things we talked about was this leadership group, which I think gets at a little bit. What your group talked about was just sort of this holistic sort of, we talked about things like libraries and historic society. So I really do believe that sort of the communities that are doing the best stuff are talking about interdisciplinary leadership teams. And there might be 2 levels. There might be the core leadership team that I still think, as I look at the Let's Move list, Donna just shared it with me and said, we both sort of said, looks like Public Works, planning still sort of missing from that core team. We're sort of health heavy, United Way and Health and sort of all the usual social service suspects, why they're all in the game. But let's get those other. But then there might be a larger advisory group that's historical society and library associations and sort of neighborhood groups. I'd say it again. Downtown business, right? Chambers, Main Street groups around the county. I think some of the smaller towns have a Main Street association or something. Get those folks, and I really can't overstate the need to get the private sector business people in the conversation. This should not be a left or a right anywhere on the political spectrum. It should not be a pro or an anti-business. Everybody's got to be in the conversation from the go. So that's just sort of a general one that I think is about more process and specific initiative about building that leadership group and the advisory around that. The 2 that we had, the reason I went back and wrote down that, because it's a theme that I think almost every group mentioned in one form or another, is school travel. So I think that's one of our natural picks already. Before we even vote or anything, each of the 4 groups went to the notion of how kids get to and from school independently. We all took different angles on it, but I heard repeated themes. Our group talked about stuff that don't just make it about the urban side, what about the county side of the trip? So the kid who takes a 40-minute bus ride or a 30-minute bus ride to school, where do they get on and off? How's the trip from their house to that? Do we do localized bus trips? So we've talked about GIS mapping of bus routes. And what about if high school kids did that as part of a geography class in high school? AP Geography, we do GIS maps of where kids live, how the bus routes are, why there are 45-minute bus rides now, and if we could stop at a fewer locations, what you can do. If you can make the route more efficient by not going up and down every cul-de-sac subdivision, but all the kids walking to the end of that cul-de-sac, right? Now the bus stops less frequently, so the ride is quicker. But now what do we need? Maybe we need a shelter at that. Maybe we need a bike rack at that bus stop so that a kid can ride his bike to the bus stop, lock it up, maybe even under a shelter. The same shelter, by the way, is where the kids stand in the winter on those miserable Montana winter days and the wind is howling as they're waiting for the bus to come. You get the idea. It's all still part of thinking about school travel both at the school end of the trip, even if for a kid who's riding on a bus, getting a walk from where the bus drops off to the school, like the story I told of walking across the park, but also where they get on the bus at home, particularly in the more rural areas. So I don't know that we had a lot of other things that weren't already said, other than I think agreement where you start with the collecting the data, the county school survey, get that data. How are kids getting to school and by what travel mode and why right now, and what does it take to change over time? The other one we had the one that's very different than anything else that was said was a real farm to school physical activity and nutrition joint program. What we liked about it was the idea of, again, going county-wide with this, not just city schools with community gardens, but what about some of the schools in the outlying areas that are in fact closer to farm and ranch type settings, in other words, where we're already doing that stuff. So imagine getting kids connected through cooperative agreements with farmers. The kids get out and actually work on the farm. And here was the big thing that to our mind made it systematic was we talked about building it into curriculum. So the first grade curriculum talks about how seeds turn into plants, so that's what those kids get exposed to. And the second grade curriculum talks, I'm making this up, right? But we're tying to the curriculum so that the kids are regularly visiting a nearby farming operation as part of, like literally weekly, getting physical activity, maybe even providing volunteer labor, helping with certain of the tasks. And then we imagined, the really cool part was, so what about the city too far from the farm, so we plant a community garden? But how about if the kids actually traded positions? How about if the urban kids got a chance at least a couple times a semester to go out to a real farm? How about if the kids from the more rural schools, a couple times a semester came in and acted as peer educators to the schools in the city? And, sort of were respected for the fact that they live in an environment where the food I eat is actually grown. So anyway, that was my team. Did I give that due justice to it? At least fair. So that was ours, and I haven't written it. Okay. We have to come up within 4 minutes the two we want to present to the big group. Two that got repeated conversations from multiple groups were school travel, and then I'm going to argue that this idea of trails and connectivity in the system becoming county-wide. I mean, there were a range of specific ideas under it that each of the groups mentioned. And even some of the programmatic stuff that you guys talked about, bike and safety education, would fit into the idea of a comprehensive approach to bicycle and pedestrian planning county-wide, not just being city. We talked about that, by the way, in our group too, the fact that, the city's got the bike lanes and everything, but the county system, very incomplete. I could make a case that if you were to ask me as an outsider who just heard the conversation, feedback from my group and the reports from the other three, those were two that resonated across the groups. But let's react to that. Tell me.
I have something to add to that, Mark. October 2010 survey showed that 80% of all residents in Missoula County, the city and county residents.
Okay, so it's not a city survey.
Right, want more trails.
Okay.
68% said they would pay more to have those. So
Those are big majorities. You don't get 68% of anything.
that's huge.
Let alone pay more for
Scientific
it.
survey. The other thing is the long-range transportation plan is up soon for adoption.
For renewal and
Renewal.
update.
And there's opportunities, at least in the valley, for us to have say, have impact. And
There'll be a series of public meetings. We'll have to do outreach. There's going to be a bunch of stuff to do that LRT, the long-range transportation
So
plan.
it's the 11th hour.
Oh, you're late?
They're almost done.
Oh, they're late in it.
So,
we're late in it,
but
Yeah.
there's still a chance to weigh in.
Are we in a place where we're advocating to keep things in? We're advocating to put things in? Where are we at?
I
What's
think,
in the plan?
The opportunity might be to advocate that paying close attention to all hormones and that we want a more active community. So as you're discussing the long-range transportation plan, or what I'm hearing here, trails and sidewalks and bike lanes are every bit as important as moving cars.
So often in a regional transportation plan like this, just so you guys know, it'd be the engineers thinking about which roads will have to get widened over which time span as population grows. That's a very common treatment of a long-range transportation plan. And I'm not trying to put words in Donna's mouth, but I would not be at all surprised if that's the case here, that they're doing a lot of talking about, we're gonna have to add lanes here and put a highway here and a connector there as growth happens in this and this and this part of the county. It'd be very common for it to be light on where the bicycle, pedestrian, and transit accommodation happens.
Well, for Missoula, fairly, we do pretty well there.
Good for you.
We have other discussion I'd like to talk to you about working with the lifer crowd, but,
Okay. We do trainings with the lifer hot crowd, and I'm gonna teach them how to tie a tie and show up at a public meeting not with their bicycle cleats on. And clomping up to the testimony stand like this, clank, clank, clank. Because all they do is alienate people who are not skinny lycra. Mammals, have you heard the term mammals? Middle-aged men in lycra. They're the ones that are totally alienating middle-aged, heavy-set man behind the city council table. I mean,
Well, welcome to town.
yeah. Okay, so you have, Donna just made the case, there's some basis for this notion of the countywide trail planning and engagement and a window of opportunity around the long-range transportation plan. That's what I just
some
heard.
facts that we have accepted.
Some evidence.
Well, and Kelly was on the city county planning commission, and just reiterated what Mark said about the fact that 1 or 2 people showing up is a huge difference.
Makes a huge difference.
And so, I mean, if we had 6 or 7 people showing
Or 20
up,
or 30.
we would start to create.
And if you came up to the
awareness.
testimony table and say, hey, how are you? I'm with the local Let's Move Coalition, and I'm a physician, I'm a nurse, I'm a health advocate, I'm a fitness trainer, you know, whatever you said, and I'm with the Let's Move, and identify yourself with this, and I just want to say this is really important what you guys are about to do.
And actually, the diversity of representation makes an even bigger difference. If we keep hearing, like when I was there and I was just an average human being, and if every single person that spoke was from the Move, Missoula, whatever, I went, oh, okay, these guys just have an agenda in my head, as a normal person with a normal reaction, my opinion. But if I had somebody who was a school teacher and then a police officer, and then just I'm just a mom that walks my kids to school, and then I had a whatever, if I had the full gamut, I was way more moved to vote in favor of the community
Because you felt
than
they were
one
reflecting.
advocating group.
Excellent. What else? Other reactions to this idea? Go.
I guess I just want to follow up on that and say, when you summarize, that it doesn't quite capture that. I mean, this is obviously a strategy to any of these, but there is kind of this comment for citizenship or advocacy. There's sedentary physical activity, but there's also some kind of sedentariness about doing something about it, you know, and so how do we build?
What's your answer to that?
Well, we were talking about personal stories. That was, you know,
Good.
and
Storytelling.
your concept of, you know, building into the curriculum is another kind of how stepping into advocacy roles.
Yeah.
I don't know, advocacy training. We were talking about
Some communities, the partnership like yours has launched, we call it an OER, O-E-R, Outreach, Education, and Recruitment Program. Outreach is just to tell the stories. Education is sort of to build a more evidence-based and have people start to learn what I would call talking points. Like, remember my 30, 23, 65? What are they? What did 30 mean? 30?
30 minutes.
30 minutes of physical activity a day. 20? Americans get it. 365? 100,000 premature deaths every year. So if that's all I taught people, that's part of my education. Now you have the talking points that you give as a preamble to your testimony in favor of the trail you want them to fund. And then the last one is recruitment. Let's actually get you to serve on a board like Kelly did. Be on the planning commission. You know, start with the library board or the conservation commission, but work your way up and run for city council eventually, you know? So, you ready to go? You gonna run?
I'm raising 2 boys.
You're raising me.
To raise the money
That's
for
the top of
her.
It's a campaign mandate. Excellent.
All right, good. So you guys comfortable with me doing a gross oversimplification of those two sort of big pods? Do you want to do it?
Well, no, let me pick up on that.
No, I want you to do it. I'm totally good with you. I'd rather.
Because I am not an underserved, underrepresented person in
Okay.
Missoula. What
But
I
I'm
want to
definitely-
make sure is that we are making sure these kind of boards activities are marketed and offered to populations that are underserved and underrepresented.
What did you do?
Why don't you say these? Why don't you do
Help
these?
them.
Well, I think we did.
No, I mean, I want you to do the stand-up when we share with the
No,
group.
I'm not
You're a big talker then. Big talker. Giving you the big talker award. giving me a hard time getting that one.
Well, the thing is that these recommendations are going to go to the whole group, who will then figure out what the next step is to get out there and do the, outreach and recruitment and making sure that the steps are actually happening. So, I mean, it's all great to talk about it in here, but if we weren't going to take it somewhere and do something with it, then this whole day would be pointless.
Yeah,
So-
I think one of the things that I shared in my small group is that we've been meeting now to bring you this conference for a year. In fact, we originally talked about doing it in May and decided to wait until September until we had our act together in the way that we could. But really, from that to gather this and set our agenda. I mean, really, that's the next step. So the whole intention is to get these items and set the agenda going forward. So let's move Missoula's agenda is being developed in this last hour. So we appreciate your input and feedback.
So that Let's Move Missoula thing, have you been attending the meetings on the master transportation plan that's in its final hours?
I've been to some, and I've been following it closely.
Yeah. And then so has Move Missoula been big in that conversation?
No.
Not as an entity or organization. We have the
No, I
60,
just was
but
curious, yeah.
we do have individuals who are part of Let's Move Missoula that have been in those conversations.
We're there
Right.
from our agencies, I think that we would want to focus on one plan in 11 hours. The next plan is the budget plan, but actually gets funded.
County schools are about to do a facilities plan, I understand, and think about all of which buildings they're keeping open, which will be elementary, which will be, grade levels. That's a huge impact, right? How, which school, what?
Dude, we are related to advocacy. We have the people who need change to get there, we need their stories.
The only reason I asked that question is, the only reason I knew that was happening is because I was on the planning board and they report to the planning board. But I would have never known any of that. And another piece that I think people need to be aware of is even if the planning board recommends it, they're just a recommending advisory board. It's the city council or the county commissioners that approve it. And so it's even more important that you guys show up when it goes to city council or when it goes to the county commissioners, especially in relationship to the county trails that we're talking about, because there were at least 3 times in the 3 years I was on the committee that we recommended against something, and the county, with a lot of research, and I felt like a lot of good intention and thought, and the county commissioners voted against us. And that's where I feel like a community voice would have been more impactful, is at the county commissioners or at city council. Because we heard it, the advisory board heard it, and went, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense, let's not do that. And then the county commissioners went, nope, we're doing it. And we went, oh, I'm glad we had 38 hours of meetings. So, just a tip to the world.
Great guys, thank you very much. Good thinking, idea generating.
Hi, welcome back. Our ranks are thinning, which is increasing your odds to win the raffle prizes. We're going to get started. We have a couple of groups who are still in love with the promise of their ideas and are taking a few minutes to get back here. But I'm just going to start, and they'll come up with their recommendations. Somebody will hand me their recommendations. So today, we thank those of you who've stuck with us till the end. We heard from Mark Fenton this morning about building and enhancing the sticky environment, improving the health of our community through environments, programs, and policies. We heard from Gracie Cavnar about shortening the distance from food to plate and connecting kids literally and figuratively with healthy and locally grown food. Dr. Darla Castelli told us about the link between kids' physical activity and their motor skills and cognitive health. Healthy kids are active kids and vice versa. Dr. Kathy Breeden talked about the effects of nutritional deficiency on obesity and disease, and also gave us tips for healthy eating and nutrition. And Dr. Kelly Rice introduced us to the knapsack self-assessment program and shared strategies and resources for child care centers and family daycare homes to improve nutrition and levels of physical activities for kids. And then you all went out and talked amongst yourselves and came back with recommendations that we will be taking to our Let's Move Missoula leadership group. And I just want to review with you who's on that group, because it really, it is a list of people and organizations that are decision makers and really have the ability to get done what you have recommended. So Community Medical Center, what we did when we originally convened this leadership group was we invited the CEOs or the top decision maker at the entity, and we said, if you can't come, send somebody who is a top decision maker and has your authority to make decisions and represent your institution. So at Community Medical Center, we have Mary Windecker, Vice President of Planning and Marketing. City of Missoula Office of the Mayor, Ginny Merriam, the Communications Officer. Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. We originally had the then president, but now we have Judy Wahlberg, who's a local realtor and former United Way board member and someone with active in the chamber. Missoula City County Health Department, you've seen the representation there, Ellen Leahy and our own Mary McCourt and Mary Pittaway. Missoula Board of County Commissioners, we have County Commissioner Gene Curtis with us this afternoon and serving on our leadership team. Missoula County Public Schools, both School Superintendent Alex Apostle, who was here this morning, Board President Tony Rabine. Missoula Family YMCA, my friend and colleague John Lang, CEO. Missoula Parks and Recreation, Donna Gockler, the director. The Missoulian, the publisher Jim McGowan. Providence St. Patrick Hospital, Jeff Fee, and also Joyce Dombrowski, Director of Nursing and all kinds of other things. I forget her exact title. University of Montana, President Royce Engstrom, United Way of Missoula County, me. So we represent a team of people who are committed to addressing childhood obesity in our community. We will take your recommendations seriously. We will prioritize them. We will devise a plan with hopefully help from a lot of you for implementing it. We will hold ourselves accountable, and you can hold us accountable too for really moving the needle on childhood obesity. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask Mark Fenton to first report from his discussion group.
So, lots of juicy discussion, far more than I'm able to tell you now, but the two biggies that sort of floated to the top, we broke into small groups and found that these two things, kind of themes came out of each of the groups. One I'll call a countywide. By the way, one of the important themes that came out of our group, think county, not just the city. What we shouldn't be thinking about, particularly as you think about built environment and physical activity, is neglect the more rural areas of the county. So that kind of came through in our two ideas. One was thinking in terms of a countywide, I'm going to call it an active school transportation plan and implementation. So that included everything from starting with data collection, figuring out how kids in schools all over the county get to and from school. What is their travel mode right now? Are they walking, biking, being driven by car, taking the bus? And then maybe even doing some GIS mapping and identifying not just where kids are coming from and by which travel mode, but what are the barriers that are influencing them. And an outreach and education program that gets parents engaged in this conversation, as well as school administrators, that especially targets some of the most at-risk communities and makes sure that as you're doing that kind of outreach and education and engagement, you're getting low-income households, you're getting ones in the most rural areas, you're making sure that it doesn't just become all the usual suspects that are kind of the bike crowd in Missoula that are already in these conversations. Administration engagement is really important, and then starting to use some of the kinds of tools that we talked about, like remote drop-off areas, so even kids who do ride a bus to school can hop off and walk through a park to get to the school, or collected bus sites. So in more rural areas, maybe there's a housing subdivision and the bus goes in and stops at 6 or 8 places. What if it stopped at only once in any one spot, and all the kids walked to that spot so they got some physical activity still as part of their bus trip, shortened the bus trip, but maybe we've got to build a shelter and a bike rack there too so kids can ride their bikes to that pickup point, and they've got a shelter on a cold winter day in Montana. Now you could add to that integrating bicycle and pedestrian safety curriculum and build it officially into the curriculum if you really want it to be sticky, as well as using all the promotional tools like walking school buses and things like that. And you could reach out to employers and say, as part of our employee wellness program, let's give our parents flex time if they're going to be the ones leading a walking school bus. So that was number one. It blends very nicely with number two. We got talking about the fact that, again, great trails work in the city of Missoula, not so much in the county as far as connectivity and comprehensiveness. Talked about the fact that there's a trail connecting Hamilton to Lolo, but then it doesn't make it all the way in to connect to the Missoula system. So talking about looking at those links and building a more comprehensive, if you will, active transportation plan for the whole county, thinking about trails, and in particular, even in the city, identifying where those missing links, those little disconnect points. The groups talked a lot about design details, whether you, for example, got volunteers involved in putting in solar lighting and safety features and signage and wayfinding, stuff like that. But we also talked about promoting the system as you build it, and interesting things like getting the hospitality industry involved. So we talked, folks recalled having shown up in a community in your hotel, having bikes that you could borrow. And, I checked in at the Doubletree. Hard for me to imagine they didn't hand me a bike map. And did you say you could go out our back door and be on a world-class trail system along the river here, connecting to a greater system? And by the way, we've got 5-6 bikes you could borrow, or there's a rental shop right around the corner. Here's a coupon. And in particular, why not give me that coupon if I show up without a car to reward me and reduce motor vehicle travel and increase bike travel? So the point being, build the physical infrastructure of a comprehensive countywide trail system, and then actually build a promotion system that gets people out on it, not just the hardcore riders. I'm sure I didn't do that justice, but those are two pretty concrete ideas. The group, we got a lot of notes of much better ideas that came from the groups from that one.
So from Kathy Breeden's session, build more physical activity into the school day before, during, and after. Definitely something that we had heard a lot about during the early part of this day. More and smaller farmers markets across neighborhoods, and to include co-ops and community gardens. Great suggestion and very Missoula appropriate. And then they said this was their alternative suggestion, but seems pretty good to me. Students who walk or bike to school get to leave a few minutes early, both as an incentive and also as a safety issue to avoid the heavy automobile traffic time. So three great suggestions. Who is reporting for Gracie Cavnar? Is it Gracie?
We had 423 suggestions. It won't take very long. Actually, our first and most we think, far-reaching idea is to establish a countywide web resource for anyone to go to be able to tell what are the resources at your disposal already if you wanted to start a school garden, start a school nutrition education program, connect your school with a farm-to-school program, all of those things that we're all interested in doing, but don't necessarily know where to go for help. So not only the resources within Western Montana, but the national, federal resources, associations, even templates, all the things that you might need if you were interested in engineering change in your community in one place, and we decided it should be on the Let's Move Missoula website, right? Then the second thing is we wanted to engineer some framework for accountability, because there is a national law now that all schools have to have wellness committees, and they all have them on paper somewhere. Most of that activity happens in a file drawer, and there's no measurement, there's no accountability piece, there's no way to hold them to standard. So our concept was to create a countywide Wellness Oversight Rating and Reporting Committee. So not telling everybody what to do, but telling everybody else what they are doing. So schools would be rated on different touch points, just like they're rated for how their kids are doing on the tests and what kind of attendance they're getting and all those other things that we're already seeing. Instead, they'd be rated on what is happening in their wellness program, whether they have a school garden, whether they have nutrition education, active on site, what is that? What is the BMI index for their students? Sort of some other things that celebrate the schools that are doing a great job and, I don't know, maybe embarrass the ones who aren't doing anything at all. So, you know, if you can't get them onto your team by cheerleading them on, then maybe you can shame them onto your team. That was our idea.
Let's see, Kelly Rice's group? Oh, Kelly herself.
All right, so our, excuse me, our group was looking at family child care homes and child care daycares in general, and we used the nominal group process to really delineate and get down to the two that we wanted. So we wanted to be short and concise. And one of the things that we decided to do as a group is to have a subcommittee with the already formed Active Kids Initiative that is focused specifically on daycares and the under 5 population. And one of the two initiatives that we wanted them to go forward with to work on for the next 2 years is one, getting greenhouses and gardens in preschools and daycares. And the second one that they were to address for the next 2 years was a policy to implement nutrition and physical activity in the daycare environment. So working on a policy that it's constantly there, that it's not just all over the map and inconsistent. So that's kind of the two that we went with. Okay.
And Darla Castelli's group, Darla Castelli.
We really focused our discussion on the school environment. And, you know, one thing resonated with me as we had this discussion. I really think the schools and the greater Missoula area are ready to embrace this and to make change. That was perfectly clear in our group. All the educators, those who were involved in joint use, the YMCA personnel, the school nurse, the parents in that room, they wanted to see change happen, and you're ready to make it happen. So we had 3 things. We had something that kind of bubbled to the top, and then we had 2 that were a tie in our group process. So the first one, it's clearly important for children to have physical activity breaks across the school day. And that was cited as our #1 strategy of importance. We have to make sure that that is coupled with resources and also teacher training. So we can't just say, this is going to happen. We have to help our teachers make that happen and provide them with the necessary resources and potentially equipment to do so. The second thing on our list was 0-hour physical activity, so before school, whether that ended up being something that was sponsored by the YMCA or joint sponsored by Parks and Recreation. Perhaps they could come into the school and provide a morning sort of either assembly or a morning program. It could be incentive-based or it could be non-incentive-based, whatever the school context is most likely to embrace. So if you want to give a middle school student a coupon and they have earned 0-hour physical activity for good behavior, that's one route. And then we also talked about the opposite of providing opportunities for those who may not have earned an incentive or a coupon, but in essence, before school physical activity. And the final thing that we came up with is the notion of developing policy with teeth in schools so that all children have access to 20 minutes of recess every day, and that recess is not, children are not withheld from recess for punishment. And so the development of that policy, utilizing the guidelines that are already set and out there, and becoming advocates and activists in our own schools to make that policy work and be adopted. Thank you very much.
So before Susan closes out our great day for us, I'm Ellen Leahy with the Missoula City County Health Department. And before you get your randomly selected door prizes, I want to do something that's completely not random, that's very select. Everyone here is a leader. That's why you're here, and when you go back and you do one thing or 10 things, you will have led a change. And our whole group, as Susan described, our initial group was leaders. But this is our inaugural event, and it took us 2 years to get to this point. And the fact that we got here today and got through this day is attributable to many people. But in particular, we have one leader among leaders who's held us together and led us and stood before us publicly and got through today. And she has thanked everyone but herself, of course, and that's Susan Hay Patrick, the director of our United Way. On behalf of Let's Move Missoula, thank you, Susan.
I guess cupcakes were out, so thanks for the flowers. I really appreciate it. I am humbled, and I'd like to be that person you described. So thank you very much. And really inspired by all of you here today.